About Time podcast is where Stephen and Ben live, and it's home to things way beyond your imagination. There's an obsessive Doctor Who fan since 2005, a sceptical boyfriend who's never seen the show before, hotties of the week, what the fuck fashion, and a whole universe of guests right here on the podcast. Today I'm joined by special guest Amber to discuss Series 4 of the Sarah Jane Adventures, and quite frankly, it's about time. Hello, welcome back. It's time for a bonus episode to discuss Sarah Jane Adventures Series 4. And as we all know, Ben does not like to watch the Sarah Jane Adventures anymore. So I thought, who better to join me than Amber, who is a listener of About Time and a patron and a massive Sarah Jane Adventures fan. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty on the mark.
Would you say you prefer it over Doctor Who?
It depends in some aspects, but I'd say it's the one that I have like the most core memories with. So like with the Russell T Davies era, that's like what sticks out to me the most about it is the Sarah Jane Adventures, really.
Yeah. Were you of the age where you were coming home from school and it was on?
Yeah, I was. It's really weird, to be honest, because when it was first airing, I was about, well, to be fair, when Doctor Who was airing, I was about 5, 6 years old, and I really did not like it. Like, my sister and my dad used to watch it, and I just hated it because I just used to get, like, nightmares from it. So when the Sarah Jane Adventures aired, I just automatically had that connotation to Doctor Who. Like, I knew Sarah Jane wasn't Doctor Who, but obviously it had that connection with the aliens and things, and I think because a lot of the aliens were so like practical, especially like, you know, during like 2005 and stuff, all the prosthetics and things. Every time I saw Sarah Jane on TV, I just hated that as well. I just switched off.
Oh.
But then weirdly in like 2009, which, I mean, Series 3 is not even really my favourite series of the Sarah Jane Adventures. I just remember my mum telling me it was back on TV because it used to come back like autumn time. That's when CBBC had all the really good stuff from what I remember, like all the dramas and things. And she told me that Sarah Jane was back on. I don't know why she told me that, to be fair, because she knew I didn't like it. But I remember just being on the computer and I went on BBC iPlayer and I just decided to watch the first episode, you know, with Androvax and the Jadoon. And it something just must have clicked because from that point, I think I just became like obsessed with it. And I'm glad you asked me to join you for Series 4 because that's definitely my favourite, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, I haven't rewatched the series much.
No.
Maybe 2 or 3 times ever. But watching Series 4 through for this, it's very good. It's probably the best series so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I think most fans would agree, to be fair, who have actually like watched the series from 1 to 5, because there's just a lot of highlights in it, I think.
Yeah, it feels like they're getting to a more mature place with it.
Definitely, yeah.
Like, it's always been quite good at not talking down to the audience, but yeah, there's lots of themes, as I'm sure we'll discuss as we go through. But
yeah, definitely.
So we started off with the Nightmare Man. Which, very strong opener, I thought.
Yeah, I did as well. And I still think it's probably one of the best openings, I think.
Yeah, and it's very, very different straight away. It's a very dark tone with like Luke talking to the video camera. And it's like, I watched that and I was thinking, gosh, we've come a long way from Invasion of the Bane.
Yeah, definitely. When you think about how all of the colours are really like poppy and like really bright and like that, especially that episode, Invasion of the Bane. And I was thinking as well, like even during the nightmare sequences, all of the colours are really like washed out and kind of like eerie and dark. It gives it that really kind of horror element to it, which I think is quite an interesting way to do it because to me, it almost feels like a finale kind of setup. But to put it right at the beginning, I think was quite a smart choice, really.
Yeah, good to dive in with something meaty straight away. And obviously it's all basically centered around the fact that Luke is being written out.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of emotional aspect to that, of like the thoughts about leaving and is everyone just going to forget me and not care about me anymore and stuff like that.
Yeah, you really do see that between him and Sarah Jane and also like with Clyde, because obviously like it sort of draws upon, because I know Joseph Lister wrote this episode, and he writes very character-driven kind of episodes, I find. So he wrote Mark of the Berserker and Mad Old Woman in the Attic, which Mark of the Berserker centered around Clyde, and then Mad Adam in the Attic centered around Rani, and then obviously this one's with Luke. And I just really like that, like with the scenes with Clyde as well, is that you kind of tap into his fear of like, oh, I'm losing like my best friend, and it's sort of, I guess in a way you could see it as him being reminded of how his dad left him and stuff like that, and he's quite insensitive at times, like when he's like avoids kind of talking to him, and Rani has to kind of smack him out of it almost. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting the different ways they respond to it, kind of very typical of their characters.
I also really like that there's a lot of, like, the music in general for this show is really good, I think. And I know that you mentioned before as well, especially in the Russell era, there's a lot of like cues and things from Murray Gold. I think, so for Sarah Jane, it was Sam and Dan Watts who created the music. And there's a lot of really interesting cues, especially in this two-parter, with the Nightmare Man and stuff. And there's quite a few like bits of like licensed music as well, which you don't really hear much on Sarah Jane, at the party and things. Yeah,
I've
noticed
course,
that there was like a Pixie Lot song, and I really like those moments. It's so like 2010, like it couldn't be more. Yeah, there's just a lot of nice moments really between the characters.
Yeah, there's some very surreal moments as well, with it all being around dreams and everything. And you get, I just had to make a note because it made me laugh so much. The scene where the three of them are doing the loser sign on their forehead. And even Sarah Jane is just doing it, and it's just like, you wouldn't expect to see that. It's so funny.
Yeah, all of their eyes are like really like animated as well. It's just really, she was really funny as well as the like the older kind of
the little lady on the scooter.
Horrible. Yeah. And she was like, and she says this line that's like really funny as well. She goes like, they want to put me in home. I said, I'll go to home. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's like really...
It's always great to see her given a chance to do something a bit different.
Very different. And I also like the TV presenter in Rani's Nightmare, where she's like, "Oh, thanks, just switch me off." Like, it's quite camp.
Yeah, it is. And of course, there's Julian Bleach playing the Nightmare Man, so making him one of the very few people who's been in all three Doctor Who, Torchwood, and Sarah Jane.
Who was he in Torchwood?
He was the ghost maker in From Out of the Rain.
Oh, of course, yeah, and he's really good in this. I think, like, not just the way he speaks, but the way he moves as well. It's really
he's
like
very
creepy.
Are you familiar with his work? Because he did a stage show called Shockheaded Peter.
No.
But this was before, like, quite a long time ago, before he did Doctor Who and everything. But I think it's based on like a German fairy tale or something. It's a bit creepy and sinister. And I haven't seen it, but I've seen pictures and things, and his performance as a Nightmare Man really reminded me of it. This sort of grotesque, creeping sort of figure. And I don't know what it is, but he always seems to have this strange, slightly sort of some sort of European accent going on when he's playing these villainous parts. Like he sounds slightly like that, you know.
Even in Davros, like it's present there as well. But like, he's a very like physical actor. I think
he is.
He's got like, his posture was really like, even the way he tiptoed into Luke's room when Clyde and Rani were sleeping was really animated and quite weird. It was quite fun to watch. Yeah,
very fun. There's that line of his that gets sort of echoed and repeated over and over again, where he says, you can't say my name, you can't tell anyone about me. And even just after watching the episode, that was just going around in my head like
like a song.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a ringtone sort of thing.
Yeah.
I do really like the themes it touches on there, like how he's basically this thing in Luke's head that he's so scared about, he just can't talk about it. And obviously, like, that touches on like themes of like abuse and things. And it doesn't obviously directly say that, but the implications are really heavy, I think. And I like how, in the end, it's them as friends that like come together.
Yes, absolutely.
That brings Luke out of his fear, which is really a nice take.
Yeah, because that stands in for so many things, doesn't it? Like, something that is when you feel alone because something is in your head and it's only you that is dealing with it.
Yeah.
And speaking of, you mentioned the music, there's this new, like, sort of heroic theme that I think ends up being in pretty much every episode of this series.
Yeah,
towards the end of every episode.
Specifically about that. You do hear it a lot. It is a bit repetitive, but I think it's so nostalgic to me now that I don't mind it. Like, it's really, I think it was even in the trailer. I might be wrong, but yeah, like, they really sold the music on this series. Like, it is really good, and I think it does kind of compare to some of Murray Gold's tracks, in my opinion, at least, anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And then we have to say goodbye to Luke as he goes off to university. Going off in the yellow car.
He goes in that old
K9.
yellow Beetle. I know it's quite sad that K9 goes, actually, but I really like the little bitchy moments between him and Mr. Smith.
Yes.
There's like, he leaves and he's like, oh, you can always contact me if you need to. And he's like, I knew you would miss me. Like, there's just something there that's like really funny to me.
Yeah. It's quite surprising that Sarah Jane wants K9 to go with Luke. Because, like, I don't know, like, I just think, if someone could find him and then, like, she's been so protective of him in the past. Like, oh, anyone sees him, like, it could change history and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. And I did think that, like, what would the other students think if they saw him? But I guess you've kind of got so much tech, like, weird tech in the world that people sort of find it him a bit strange, but then, I don't know, maybe not question it anymore.
Yeah.
I quite like the moments between Clyde and Rani. I think this is where they started to build it up a little bit more. And they sort of remind me like Ron and Hermione in a way.
Oh, definitely.
In the way they're like, ugh, whatever kind of thing. Like, Rani's sort of always rolling her eyes at him, and there's like a lot of undertones there.
Yeah, definitely that ramps up throughout the series, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It was starting to creep in the last series, but I think they made it much more explicit now. It's interesting to think about what they would have done with that had the show continued.
Yeah, well, they did reveal it in a magazine. So, like, basically after Elizabeth Sladen passed, they brought out a companion magazine, which was part of Doctor Who magazine. And they did say, like, Russell was kind of torn between, like, they did get together, I believe, but I think his plan was for Rani to, like, either do some journalism or leave the country and go somewhere else and do some travelling. So I think it was always the plan. It was just about how they would get to that point, basically. But yeah, overall, very good episode, I think.
Yeah. Then we had the Vault of Secrets, which was okay, not quite as good.
To be fair, I think that's kind of like a general consensus within like people who've watched it. I think it's grown on me. It has quite a few fun sort of action pieces, I think. Mm-hmm. And I do quite like the side characters of Urshan and Minty.
Oh my God, yeah.
Interesting.
As Clyde
name.
says, they sound like a toothpaste.
Yeah, and they literally do.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see Geeta and Haresh again, because I always find them quite the comedic duo.
They are very funny.
But yeah, Men in Black, it's a bit unoriginal sort of thing.
I quite liked Mr. Dread. I think the actor did a very good job of that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, a very funny moment when he takes the man's van and he says, "Oh, you need a new motor, mate," and he's like, "Thanks, I'll take this one."
I'll have this one. Just rips the door off like in front of his face.
Yeah, I think actually they do quite a good job of like balancing the tension and the stakes with comedy like throughout.
Yeah.
Even when it's quite drastic, like there's still moments of comedy, particularly when Geeta's involved as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Her and Haresh are really funny. I do think this series, I think the humour's better maybe in this series compared to other ones. Not that the others were not funny at all, but I think it lands a bit better in this one. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's slightly more mature in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or maybe they're just getting comfortable with it and everything.
What did you think about them wiping Geeta's memory at the end? Yeah,
I was thinking about that. It was a shame, really.
I think that, because I've always wondered, like, what would happen if they didn't do that. And I think it maybe would have been a nice contrast to see how she would fit into that group in a way.
Yeah, she would have been very different from Alan when he found out, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's always a bit tricky when you've got these children characters who are being put in danger, and Sarah Jane's the responsible adult. And then when you've got their parents involved, like it's a bit shaky where Alan's a bit like, oh, well, you're too far into it now, basically. I'm not going to stop it.
Yeah, that's the thing. They probably didn't want kids watching to be like, oh, like another adult like involved kind of thing, because you're very much kind of in line with the kids sort of thing. So, yeah.
And obviously Return of Androvax in this episode.
Yeah.
And they went down that route again of, someone who was previously a villain is now saying they want your help.
They do that a lot, and
They do.
I mean, it's a bit weird because the last time they did that was the series 3 finale, which is only really like 2 stories away.
Exactly.
It is a bit like, come on, Sarah Jane, like 12 planets.
Yeah.
Like.
But I do think it's admirable for her to be like every time it happens, she gives them the benefit of the doubt because she wants to see the good in people and stuff.
Yeah, and you see how that kind of rubs off onto Clyde and Rani as well, like especially in the next story.
Oh yes. But also like this theme of just because one member of this species is bad doesn't mean you have to write off the whole rest of the species.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is a good lesson for the audience.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously we see throughout Doctor Who as well. So
yeah,
apart from the Daleks, obviously.
Well, yeah. So something that I like when you get a story like with Androvax and the body shifting and all that, it's very funny watching the different cast members do their own takes on Androvax.
Yeah.
It's sort of to varying levels of success.
Yeah, that's true. Some people really ramp it up, whereas others are a little bit more subtle with it. Like Clyde was quite subtle with it, I think.
Yeah.
Rani was very much like, she did get quite a lot of dialogue, to be fair, so I think. But yeah, it was
I thought she did quite well, actually. Like her body language was very sort of slinky with it, which was good.
Yeah, and then there was Geeta, obviously, as well. I imagine that was quite fun for, I think it's Mina Anwar, the actress, because obviously usually she just kind of sat around the house with Haresh, like she does like very short kind of scenes. So I imagine it was quite fun to actually like get involved in the drama this time and actually play
definitely
quite a different character.
Yeah. Also, talking about the wiping of the memory at the end, you've also then got Ocean and Minty coming along, and then Sarah Jane and the rest of them are sort of basically just gaslighting them and saying, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, it's one of those things, it's like, it's a plot device that gets used a lot in these kind of stories.
Yeah.
But when you stop and think about it, it's a little bit like, oh, we're just going to gaslight them, and isn't that funny? Ha ha. But
it is quite awful, really, as well. When you see about Ocean's kind of backstory and how obviously it really affected her, and then they're just like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry, kind of thing. Yeah, it is quite unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know what else they could have done, really.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think the writers would know either.
In a 25-minute episode that's got to wrap up, yeah.
Yeah, what can you do? I did quite like the CGI. I know it's not amazing, obviously, but I think this series, there's quite a lot of shots that look quite nice to me, and I quite liked the vault inside. I think that looked quite cool.
Yes, it did, yeah. I might be wrong, but it looked to me like the same location they used in Rose for the Nestine Consciousness, you know, with the balcony.
Yeah, I didn't actually think of that. No, there's quite a lot of reused locations on Doctor Who. Yeah, possibly.
But yeah, it was an okay episode.
Yeah, it was all right. What would you rank it based on Ben's? Ben's reactions.
Yeah, I'd call it anywho, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. That's about where I would put it as well, I think.
So then the third story is Death of the Doctor.
Yes.
Which is quite a highlight, really.
I agree, yeah.
Again, with this getting more mature, that the whole theme of grief which runs through it is very interesting. And the way that at the beginning Sarah Jane is so like in denial. Obviously it turns out that she's right, that he hasn't actually died. But, you know, if you take it at face value at the beginning, like her denial is very sort of, it's quite sad.
Yeah, and it's quite almost out of character for her, really. But it ties into the sort of theme of grief, I think, that Rani and Haresh talk about, which is a really nice conversation, really. He sort of blatantly says, like, oh, it's like when Grandad died and your mum did this and she would do that. And then she eventually kind of broke down and was really emotional about it. And I just like that scene as well where Rani says to Sarah Jane, like, look, I know it seemed really intense, but obviously, like, you know, we don't judge kind of based on character. Because I think what Sarah Jane says is like, oh, well, look at that thing, like, as if I'd trust that, just look at him.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
And Rani's kind of, you know, she brings her back down to earth a little bit, and she's obviously in that denial stage, but she's like, we need to look at the facts that were getting brought to us and just kind of process them and see where it takes us.
Absolutely, yeah. No, she's very level-headed there.
Yeah, it's quite
and
mature.
reminds Sarah Jane what she said, since when did we judge by appearances? And it's obviously just because it's such a massive thing. Like, it's easy for Sarah Jane to be acting a little bit out of character because she's all over the place.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want it to be true. But yeah. But speaking of the Shan sheath, I think they look really cool, actually. Like, obviously they're done practically, and like, I guess, I don't know exactly how they're done. There's someone in the costume, but there must be a sort of bit of puppetry going on as well, or something.
Yeah, they look really cool. I think the eyes blink as well,
They do
which
look
is
good.
really
Yeah.
cool. One of them is voiced by David Bradley, is that right?
That's right, yes.
I thought I'd recognise
Yeah.
his voice.
Yeah. And it's quite on the nose that, they're vultures, and then it turns out that they're literally preying on the death and the grief and or what have you, or using the situation for themselves. And yeah.
Yeah, it is quite clever, really, and interesting to see where things ended up. I really liked seeing Joe Grant as well. That was interesting.
That was fantastic. Yeah. And it's nice that Russell T Davies got to write this, like, and bring Joe into it and everything as an old time fan.
Yeah, because he never wrote any stories for the 11th Doctor. Obviously, that was Stephen Moffat when he took over.
Exactly,
but it's just really interesting to see like him write him, and then obviously that past companion as well. Because I've never actually watched any classic Who. So for me, when I watched this as a kid, it was kind of like school reunion where we were introduced to Sarah Jane, but this time we're seeing like another companion, and it was just really like fun to see the different kind of aspects come together.
Yeah, I feel like it was Russell putting his stamp on how he wanted to imagine that Joe Grant would have turned out, at this age.
Yeah,
because I've seen some of her stories, and obviously she's very different back then when she was a young woman, and she's become this sort of traveling hippie, gushing sort of old lady,
who brings like candles with her everywhere.
Yes, and she's constantly like, "Oh, you're gorgeous. Oh, you're darling. Oh," about everything. It's really funny. And Katie Manning is very well loved by the fandom, and I think she loves the fandom as well. She's very involved.
She's delightful, yeah.
So I think that's a lot of her own personality coming through as well.
Yeah, I really liked the moment where Amy and Rory were mentioned too, which was quite fun because it tied into the current timeline of the main show, obviously. So
exactly, yeah.
It was just really nice. And that planet looked quite cool as well. I know it was like a kind of junkyard scrap heap sort of thing. And they've obviously just changed the tint to red. Yeah. But when I was about 10 and watching it, I thought that looks really cool, actually. Because you don't see, obviously, different planets in Sarah Jane ever, really, because it's all based on Earth. So it was a nice little change. It was very brief, but I thought, that looks quite cool.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You said it was interesting, Russell writing for the 11th Doctor. Did you feel any differences with him?
It's kind of like reverse for me because at this point when it was airing, I still didn't really watch Doctor Who. I kind of started it late 2011. I mean, and that was starting with Series 1. I think I went to like Blockbuster and managed to get a Series 1 box set because obviously I really liked the Sarah Jane adventure. So I thought, well, it's about time I'd start watching Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So I saw this episode before I actually watched Matt Smith in the 5th series. And I think Russell does it really well, to be fair. I think it's kind of on par with how Moffat writes him. I mean, I haven't watched Series 5 for a while, and obviously you and Ben are going through it at the moment. I'm trying to think of any stark differences, but I don't know if I can. I quite like his take on him.
I think to be honest, I think it's Matt Smith's performance that unifies it, because I think, to be honest, a lot of the time showrunners will just write the Doctor as the generic Doctor, and then the actor will put their own spin on it, and then that does feed into itself, and they sort of start to, But what I said, when you first start writing them, I think it's just going to be the Doctor as a character.
Yeah,
and that's what I felt in this. I felt that Russell was writing the Doctor as he'd written him in his own run, but that Matt Smith was just doing it differently than, say, David Tennant would have done.
Yeah, I've not really thought about it like that, but it makes sense as like, a blank canvas, and the writers just have like the fundamental, like basic characteristics of the Doctor, and then obviously the actors bounce off that. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that, really.
Yeah, and he got in lots of references to the 10th Doctor's regeneration and all that, about Apparently he said last time he was dying, he looked back on all of them, every single companion. So that's a little bit of a retcon.
Yeah, it is a bit.
So he must have had even more time than we thought, just sort of travelling back.
Imagine how long. Yeah, he's just like, oh, like in agony, like going around. Because like the end of Time Part 2, there's that really long segment at the end where he kind of visits everyone and goes back.
Exactly,
and imagine how much longer.
We could have had an
would
extra
been.
hour, yeah.
Yeah. He's just like, oh,
but he
my
can't,
leg's gone now.
He can't have visited all of them. I mean, like, because Susan, he's definitely not seen her since he said goodbye to her.
Yeah, maybe he's just saying
like,
every single one to make Joe feel a bit better, maybe.
Probably, yeah. He's probably just lying as usual.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, watching this, like, this whole theme of the Doctor dying and, like, if he ever did die, the universe might shudder and all that. And it seems actually, when you think about where this aired in the chronology, it's quite convenient foreshadowing for Series 6.
True, very true. Yeah.
And River says something similar to that at the end, doesn't she? In the wedding of River's song, she says something about if the Doctor ever died, the universe would be crying out or something.
Yeah, so it's all quite interconnected.
Yeah, don't know whether that was deliberate or not. I don't know, but
potentially, maybe he sent the draft to Moffat or something and was like, "What do you think?" And he's like, "Put that little thing there, and I can kind of develop on it." Do you prefer this story to The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith?
They're so different. It's hard to say, really. Well, they've both got a major emotional upheaval for Sarah Jane, so that's quite interesting. But they are different. I feel like there's more going on in this one. The other one was quite static, like just once they got in the hall where they were having the wedding, they were just kind of trapped there for a bit and just lots of talking. Yeah,
that's how I feel about it too.
I know this is really nitpicky as well, but like Joe and Sarah keep saying that they feel like if the Doctor ever dies, they'll feel it in their heart or something. And I'm just like, yeah, that's a lovely idea, but like the Doctor's a time traveler, and like as we see in Series 7, like his grave could well be somewhere out there in the universe in time. So like he could be dying anytime in the past or the future or whatever. So it doesn't make any sense at all. But
no, I think it's just one of those like ramped up like little emotional moments between two companions, which is quite sweet, but yeah, it's a little bit like, yeah, but you wouldn't know that really.
I was just sitting there going, well, actually, yes. And it was sad how Joe was a bit jealous of Sarah Jane when she was like, oh, he came back to see you, and oh, it was more than once.
Yeah, it really reminds me of like Rose and Sarah Jane. Yeah, obviously they were a bit more bitchy towards each other about it, but with Joe it was a little bit more like sad and more tender. Yeah,
I don't think the funeral would have been the place to start being bitchy. But,
no, imagine.
Yeah. And of course, Joe's got this grandson, Santiago, who comes in dressed like Harry Styles.
Again, so 2010.
It was so 2010. It was hilarious.
Yeah, even the necklace.
Yeah. When did One Direction come about? Was it 2010 or 2011, something like that?
I think, yeah, around then, 2010 or 11. I didn't really listen to them growing up, but I think that sounds about right.
Yeah. But yeah, and then of course at the end of this episode we get like a nice little reflection on some of the old companions and what they're up to these days, or what Sarah Jane's heard they might be up to, which is interesting. Yeah,
it is. And I remember watching it as a child, and again, like I didn't know anything about Classic Who, really, just that the show was a very long and big thing in kind of British culture. So obviously I knew the Doctor had past companions. I knew Sarah Jane was one. So it was really actually nice to hear her mention about like Ian and Barbara. And who else does she mention? Sorry.
So Tegan, I think she mentions.
Yeah.
And Ace, who she calls Dorothy, which is obviously her real name. And she says she runs that company, A Charitable Earth, which stands for Ace. So
yeah. And yeah, that just made me quite interested as a kid. I mean, not enough to watch Classic Who, apparently, but it did make me think, oh wow, like there really is a lot of history to
There's
this
a long line.
whole universe.
Yeah. It's always interesting how companions react to that when they realise that, you know, like remember Rose saying like, oh, I'm just the latest in a long line, am I?
Yes.
And Amy, even like she thinks that she's the one person in the universe the Doctor trusts completely and all that. And it's like, they do have a great relationship, but There have been others before.
Yeah, and it's nice to see Clyde and Rani's kind of how they sort of interact with that with Sarah Jane, because
Hmm.
obviously they're not specifically companions of the Doctor, but they know they're part of this whole thing,
Yes.
and it's just nice to see them, sort of respond to that and how Sarah Jane talks about it.
Yeah. Then we have The Empty Planet, which is, well, obviously it's like the Sarah Jane Light episode.
Mm.
I really liked this one, actually. I thought it was really good.
I also really like it, yeah.
First thing I noted down was that there's no cold open. It just went straight into the credits. And I wondered why that was, because that's unusual. And
Yeah.
maybe they had to cut something, or I don't know, maybe they just didn't want one for that episode, but that was different.
It is. I think it's because there's kind of, I would say it's quite fillery, but not in like a negative way. I noticed that there's about 5 minutes before the storyline actually kicks in, which is quite a long time, really, for your usual sort of 25-minute. In the first part of like a Sarah Jane episode, it usually relatively kicks off quite quickly.
Yeah. What was going on in that 5 minutes? I can't remember.
So, like, Clyde and Rani in Sarah Jane's attic, Mr. Smith is like monitoring the world, communications, and then they basically leave, and he's at her house, and she's like offering him a CD. God, remember lending people CDs. And you kind of just get to see their separate light. Like, you don't really see Clyde's mum that often, for example.
That's true, yeah. I guess they had to set up, like, everything that was going to be vanishing, like, so you would know what they were missing.
Yeah, so it was quite creative in that way. It was like a sort of a little slow, simmering build-up.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you have that silence and everything
That's amazing, yeah. I thought that was done really well.
Yeah, especially the streets, because I don't know how they managed that really, but there were times where I thought like, wow, it does actually look really sort of empty.
Yeah, it was like a, you could make a whole film with that premise, and they've done it for a 2-part CBBC show. Very interesting. And I also noticed how in the previous episode, when Sarah was upset about the Doctor's death, and Rani ran home to her dad and just hugged him and said, "Don't you ever go anywhere, will you?" And then the next episode, he and everyone else vanishes, which was cool, I thought.
Yeah, that is a really good connection, that.
And so, yeah, it's just the Clyde and Rani show for this story, isn't it? They're on their own.
Yeah, and you really get to develop their kind of relationship a little bit more as well, without any sort of, because usually there's always like an alien attack or an invasion, and obviously they're working together, but this time they really, really are just together trying to figure it out. And they get like a bit frustrated with each other, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
It's not all like sail smoothing kind of perfect team sort of thing. They're a little bit like, well, I was here first actually, so I would know these. And she's like, well, if you're going to be like that, then...
Yeah, it's very, it felt very coming of age to me, in that, like, they are of that age, they're sort of sixth form age, and all of a sudden their parents and families and everyone have gone, and they're on their own, and it's like they've got no support. And it's kind of like what it feels like in a way when you become an adult and suddenly you realise, oh, I am an adult. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, that was really interesting to see that.
I really liked I don't even know if it was like the CGI planet as well, like the background with the purple sky. I'd say this episode, there's not a lot of like amazing visuals.
No.
You don't really see a lot happening. Obviously, it's just sort of empty streets and 2 giant robots. So when that came along, I thought, oh, that looks really interesting that they've just placed that there in the little flashback scene that we get with Gavin.
Which was an interesting plot as well, wasn't it? This idea that he's an unknowing heir and prince.
Yeah.
And it's funny though, because it's a very, it's a kind of sci-fi concept that, he's completely unaware, but it turns out he's half of a different species and he's entitled to this throne and everything. But in Sarah Jane, there's not really space to explore that deeply, as in like his whole life has basically been a lie.
Mm.
And when he goes off at the end, it's like they sort of say, oh, Mr. Smith's put out the story that he's moved to Australia. But that doesn't really sort of explain, like, his aunt and uncle that he lives with. Like, what are they going to think and what are they going to say? That he's just disappeared.
Yeah, it's a bit wishy-washy, like,
it is a little
sort
bit.
of thing. It's nice to explore, like, the idea of, like, a child living somewhere, but he doesn't feel like he quite belongs. And he's always felt, like, a little bit different. And
Yeah, if he'd lived in like a children's home or something, that might have been easier.
Yeah, it would have sort of amplified it maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more. But I do get what you said. There's a lot of times where Mr. Smith will be like, "Oh, I'll just put out a news article
Yeah.
to just explain this," and it's like, we're living in the era of like fake news and
Yeah.
things. You're not safe, Mr. Smith.
No. The yellow and red robots were quite fun. And they reminded me very much of the robots in Dinosaurs on a Spaceship.
Yeah, I used to always think they were the same,
Yeah.
but no, I guess not. And
No.
I'm sure they've used the robots on a different TV show on CBBC. I think it might have been
Really?
the Spartacle. I think it was called the Spartacle Mystery. I might be wrong,
Oh.
but I remember seeing adverts for it. Like there's little idents that you get on the
Mm-hmm.
BBC, and I kept seeing those robots, and I was like, it was just really like messing with my head because I was like, they're on Sarah Jane. Like, why are they in this random other
Mm.
CBBC drama? But obviously,
Yeah.
BBC like to reuse the costumes
Yeah.
for a lot of
Cutting the
things.
costs. Yeah.
But also, I really like throughout this series, there's like a constant sort of pop culture reference, and for some reason, it's always Lady Gaga.
Oh my God, yes.
I've noticed it a couple of times. It's in the finale, but it's also in this where he's just kind of quickly scanning the newspaper
Yes.
and it's like, wow, that really was a time where, like, when you think about singers and like celebrities today, she really was kind of like one of those ones that would always be in the paper or in the news. So it really solidifies the time period that this came out.
Yeah, definitely. I was also thinking with Gavin being this single prince and heir that the robots are looking for, and they've taken all the other humans away and everything. What a coincidence that he also happened to live in Ealing, just down the road. Like, he could have been anywhere else on the planet. Like,
yeah, it is very, very lucky. There's a lot of, it's like in the next episode as well, there's a bit of a convenience going on. But yeah, I suppose if you watch that as a child, you don't really think about it.
no,
But to
I
be
know.
fair, I'm sure there is something Sarah Jane has mentioned. Oh, it might be in the finale again, actually. I might be getting mixed up, but she mentioned something about the Ealing Triangle,
Yeah, that comes up
where
in the
it's kind of
finale.
like, yeah, it's kind of like Cardiff and where Torchwood is, and how there's
Yeah,
a
but the
rift.
thing is, with Cardiff, you've got the explanation of the rift, and like in Ealing, there is no explanation really. It's just
No, it's
that
just a
that's where Sarah
triangle,
Jane happens
apparently.
to live. Yeah.
Yeah, that is true. So I think they do kind of try to explain it, but not maybe in a very good way.
I mean, some of the things that happen around there are because Sarah Jane lives there. So, for example, like when the Blathereen came and we gave them those spores and all that, like that they went there
Yeah.
because Sarah Jane was there. So
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still.
And the trickster, every time he showed up, he knew where she lived, obviously. So
Yeah, they went through lots of Clyde and Rani development in this, and also more than one reference to them being the new Adam and Eve and basically having to restart the human race. Which
yeah, that was a bit weird.
It was a bit weird. And like,
I mean,
Clyde was like quite up for the idea, and Rani was like, no.
it was I mean, like, if it was one jerk one time, fair enough. But it's kind of brought up twice, and you're like,
Yes.
what?
Very weird.
I like the ending where she would obviously, she sat down with her dad, and he's like, you had me worried sick. Like, what happened? Where did you go? And then Clyde sort of strolls in, and you can kind of see the relief, because I think she would rather her dad believe that she was off sort of skiving with Clyde and just like fooling around, rather than tell him the truth about Sarah Jane, which is quite a funny moment, really.
Yeah. I did think this was good though. Like, probably, I would imagine, quite a cheap episode to do.
Yeah.
But it really, really worked for me really well.
Yeah, I think so too.
So moving on then to Lost in Time, which was probably my least favourite of the series.
Oh, really? Because it's actually my favourite, I think.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I just found it I didn't find it very engaging. Maybe it was just me, but I was just not really interested. I think it's because they go down their 3 separate plots, and there doesn't feel like there's much time given to any one of them.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a good point.
But yeah, you've got this mysterious shopkeeper man who can somehow create time windows.
Yeah.
And his parrot, who apparently is in charge.
That was due to be explained in series 5, I believe, but obviously,
Yes.
unfortunately, they didn't get there, which is a
Yeah.
shame because he has this really cool piece of music as well.
Oh, yes, he
Um,
does.
I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it really does solidify the sort of mystery about him,
Yes.
which I
It
quite
sounded
like.
a little bit Danny Elfman-like, I think, from what I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
So I know they've said that he was going to be explored further, but have they ever said like what he was going to be, or has that been kept under wraps?
He was meant to be connected to the trickster in a way, I
Oh,
believe. I don't know if you've seen series 5 yet, so I won't
I have.
like
I have,
mention
yeah.
anything specific you have. Yeah, but basically with Sky,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, she was going to be his child, the trickster's child or something.
yeah, so all of
Yes.
that was connected somehow. I can't remember the specifics. I should have researched really, but it's all in that magazine really where Russell really kind of explains the different intentions and how like storylines starting in series 4 were going to lead into series 6.
Yeah.
So it's all
Oh,
quite
wow.
interesting really.
Yeah. So, yeah, he sends them on this quest to get 3 objects made of a special sort of metal that is apparently forged
Yeah,
in a time vortex, however that works.
Chromastine or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember it just when I first watched it, I just thought, oh, this is very different because we're usually always on Bannerman Road. That's kind of like the base. We're at the school. We're at like some sort of random location and it's
Mm.
present day. So I just remember it being quite nice to explore them in different time zones. I mean, I know we've done that before with the Trickster episodes,
Mm.
but I thought it was quite nice that they all got to do something and had to almost fend for themselves in a way.
Yeah, that is true. I think I would have liked it more if there was more time to explore. Like, I don't know if they've ever done any Sarah Jane novels, but like I feel like it would have worked well as one of those.
Oh, I agree. I would love that, honestly. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think you do kind of need more time for something like this because it's like one scene, like two characters are talking and it's really quiet, and then the next scene, like Clyde and George are like running really fast to get away from something else. So you're like, oh, what was
Mm.
happening there again? Oh yeah, that's what was happening, and you've got to kind of bounce back and forth a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, it was nice in that like 3 quite different periods, and like it's kind of like giving the children of CBBC a history lesson
Yeah.
in like Lady Jane Grey and all that.
Yeah, that one was my favorite, I think.
Yeah, I thought the girl who played Jane was very good.
Yeah, and I really liked the friendship that develops between her and Rani.
Yeah, it was very sweet.
Sarah Jane's was probably the weakest for me in terms of the
Mm,
stories, but I did quite like the girl that played Emily. I'm not sure who the actress is,
mm.
but they are very good. And I remember thinking like she could almost have her own show on CBBC. She felt like a
Yeah,
strong kind of like detective character. It was quite fun to watch that.
yeah, she was good. Again, very, very dark for CBBC with all the children who died in a fire and everything.
Yeah, yeah,
I know
it
it
was
sort of
quite
gets
intense, really.
altered by the end, but yeah, I was quite surprised when that came up.
Yeah, the sound effects and everything.
Yeah.
Also, a fun fact, I only realised this about last month because I'd been to watch Wicked, and I realised that the actress Lucy Jones, who plays the babysitter, not a very good babysitter, obviously,
Oh, Lucy
but
Jones. Yeah, I know
yeah,
she's played Elphaba,
she's
hasn't
been
she?
Elphaba on the West End, and
Yeah, I think
I got
Ben and I
to.
saw her.
Yeah, yeah, I saw her too. That
Did
was one
you?
of the ones because I saw it I think it was a couple of years ago. I can't remember who played Glinda, but she was Elphaba. And
Yeah.
I bought the program and I saw in the credits it said the Sarah Jane Adventures next to her name. And I was
Ah.
like, oh, I wonder who she was because I don't recognize her face.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, because I went on IMDb and
Yeah.
realized she was the babysitter
Yeah. Perhaps she'd been a Slovene with the green.
with all the prosthetics on.
Yeah. The Nazi stuff. I mean, again, like it's a little history lesson, a little bite-sized history lesson.
Yeah.
I liked the bit where Clyde was standing up to them and saying basically like, "Oh, you guys just hate everyone who's different to you," and
Yeah,
I liked
it was
that.
quite powerful. Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it was a bit scattered.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But yeah, I would have been really interested to see what they have done with this shopkeeper or whatever he is. going forward.
Yeah, that's one of the many mysteries that
So
we like to...
do you think he would have turned out to be a good character or a bad character?
From what I remember, he was good.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I think he was
seems like a
basically
good
like a
character.
guardian or something. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
Oh, he was connected to the Doctor in some way as well, I think.
Oh,
I could be wrong, but I'm sure there was something about the Doctor giving him Sky, which is the child from
right.
series 5 that
Yeah,
Sarah
yeah.
Jane adopts, and I think he'd asked him to deliver her to Sarah Jane to kind of protect her from the trickster.
Right.
I could be wrong. Again, I need to check up on it, but I'll let you know once I know for definite.
Yeah. It's just whatever he is, he's obviously supremely powerful because he can just create a time window by clapping his hands. So there's
Yeah, or doing that
something going
weird.
on
He
there.
like clicked. He had this like funny sort of click every time
Yes.
he would open a window. And I thought that was quite interesting little
Yeah.
choreography.
Yeah. And then of course it all turns out that the parrot was the one that was really in charge.
Oh yeah, that's the
Yeah.
biggest twist of all in this
That
episode.
was funny. And Clyde's like, "All this time I've been working for a flipping parrot."
Yeah. I really
Yeah.
like that moment where he points his phone to that Nazi,
Mm.
but he's randomly got Tyre Cruz like queued up and playing. Like with like a, do you remember the Windows Media Player sort
Yeah.
of background?
Yeah.
Like
Oh my god.
that's
Yeah.
playing in
yeah.
the background, which was
Yeah.
quite funny.
That is funny. But yeah, that's always an interesting thing. I always wonder, like, you have like a smartphone. If you were to take that back and show someone from history what they would make of it, like without any context, it's just so like far advanced. It's that thing that I always saying to Ben about like advanced technology being indistinguishable from magic. Like if you don't, yeah. Well, that brings us on to the finale then, which I just watched this morning, which is Goodbye, Sarah Jane Smith. Which again I thought was fantastic. Really strong finale.
Yeah, I agree. It really is, and it's quite the title itself is hefty.
Oh, it's very hefty.
Because I remember like you would get adverts sort of for each story, I think, and I remember they really advertise this one a lot because obviously it's a finale. Like they want a lot of kids watching it.
Yeah,
and I just thought, wow, like what the hell? What do they mean? Goodbye, Sarah Jane Smith. Like where is this gonna go? Sort of thing. And obviously then you watch the episode and it's got a lot of themes throughout it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it would have been different watching it at the time when it aired, but certainly now it's a very, very difficult watch at many moments. Well, knowing that Elizabeth Sladen would pass away not long afterwards, really. And also that she was very ill at this time and she knew it, but nobody else did really, apart from Russell. Yeah. I found the scene where she asks Mr. Smith to give her a Mediscan just almost impossible to watch. You know, the fact that when he's saying to her, Sarah Jane, you're very ill, and blah, 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 like, that must have been so difficult for her to film.
It's one of those type of performances where they don't even have to do a lot. It's just all in the sort of face and the eyes. And even Mr. Smith, like, he's very monotone usually, but even he's kind of presented as almost like upset to actually have to tell her the truth about something.
Yeah. But aside from that aspect of it, like, I think it was just really well done. Like, you know, she is an older woman, and like there is this idea of her feeling a bit like obsolete and like she's going to get replaced by a younger model and like a cooler model. That shot when you see her car parked next to Ruby's like fancy sports car in the drive, it's like, yeah, very appropriate.
Yeah. And even with how Ruby spends her time with Clyde and Rani, obviously Clyde and Rani don't see it that way. They're not like, oh, this is the new Sarah Jane. That's not how they're thinking at all, really, in those moments that they're sharing with Ruby. But they don't really see the sort of impact that's having on Sarah Jane when she's watching, say, like Rani take driving lessons with Ruby. And it's like when you have a friend at school and you see them talk to new people and it's sort of hitting you like, oh, we're kind of growing apart in a way, even though they're sort of like my family. It's just really sad to see Sarah Jane go through these motions.
Yeah. I did wonder, like, obviously we find out what Ruby's plan is all along, is to sort of drain Sarah Jane's life force and feed on the excitement and all that. So she obviously had this plan of replacing her. So why was she so, like, distant and playing hard to get and quite rude at the beginning? Or do you think that was just a case of, like, it was going to make them more intrigued to follow her if she was acting like that? Maybe.
I think that's possibly what was going on there, yeah. Yeah, I really like that scene where they just sort of march into her house and she's like, what the fuck are you doing, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting as well because she must know about them. She'll know about Clyde and Rani too. So when Rani's there kind of pushing for sort of questions and, you know, being like a little journalist that's on Sarah Jane's side, it's working in favour for Ruby because she obviously knows they're interested now. Like, they want to know more about me. This is how I get my way in.
And how long has Ruby been on Earth and living this life? Because she's got posts with her name on it in her house. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
she's
and then
got
it turns
bills
out
to pay.
She's an alien that's just popped down to Earth to do this thing, but like...
Maybe for Mr. White. We don't know.
Oh, maybe. But yeah.
That little PSP sort of portable thing that she carries around.
That is funny, isn't it? The AI, which, you know, is very common now. Yeah. I also liked when Mr. White created this video, he basically did a deep fake of Sarah Jane.
Yeah.
Which is like, nowadays that's an actual thing that is like a genuine worry.
Yeah, there was a tweet I saw not long ago and it was like Sarah Jane was the original victim of a deep fake.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just a screenshot of that video. Yeah, it's scary how much... I suppose at this point in time, we was like looking ahead in terms of like what the current technology could become. So they really weren't far off at all with what they came up for in this episode.
Yeah.
We saw Luke again as well.
Oh, we did, yes. He turned up, thinking back to Santiago, he also turned up dressing like a One Direction member.
With the neck scarf,
yeah, he looked very cool. But yeah, Ben came down the stairs this morning when I was watching it, and he saw Luke, and he said, "Oh, they really went into the gay look, didn't they?"
The denim jacket and everything.
Yeah, it was nice to see him back though, and have him back like fighting for his mum. Yeah,
he was quite harsh on Rani though. I felt like, but obviously he's concerned. Yeah. But she gets quite a lot of the brunt of the blame in this episode, I find.
She does, yeah. Unfairly, really.
Yeah.
I really liked the scene where she's trying to trick Ruby and not let her notice the phone. And she does pretty well, actually, until she just lays it on too thick about like, oh, do you know what? Yeah. I'm glad that it's you instead of Sarah Jane. I like you better. It's like, okay, you've pushed it too far now.
Yeah.
And then she was so camp. She was like, oh, you really shouldn't say such things because they're not very convincing. Like...
And then like grabbed her arm in the process of it. She was really intense.
It's very funny. The actress that played Ruby, I think Julie Graham is her name. She was very good for the role.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen her in things before, like I don't know if she's been in like EastEnders or something.
I don't know, I've got no idea.
But you can feel that sort of kind of character coming across in her performance.
Yeah. Also made me laugh how at the beginning when they saw her and she was like fighting aliens or whatever, and Clyde just turns to Sarah Jane and says, "She's exactly like you." I'm like, what? Because she's wearing a leather jacket and she's fighting aliens. It's exactly like you.
She's got brown hair. Like.
Yeah.
She's been imprisoned into a golf ball, as Clyde describes it, which is interesting. Very strange. And then at the end, she sends her off like into space. I don't think she sends her in any particular direction. She just sort of sends her drifting off, doesn't she? Just let it go, like a golf ball. Just let it go into the rough, like anywhere basically. And I love that little scream she does at the end. She's like looking at the camera almost. Yes. And she's like, "This world will suffer." I wonder if they had any plans to bring her back. Oh, possibly, maybe. Yeah. She was a good villain, I will say. We've got a few nice moments with Clyde as well, especially when it was quite scary, really, where he's like you're worried for him because he's like running out of oxygen and he just pulls out his phone and starts recording these messages, obviously to his mum and then his best friends and Sarah Jane, which is quite nice. Yeah, that was a really good moment. And then again, they're teasing when he says to Rani, like, I always, and then he doesn't say anything. Oh, believe me, that's an ongoing thing. Big Finish have
Oh,
took
really?
the helm on that sort of thing.
Oh
Yeah,
my
and you're
God.
like, really? They're like, what? In their 30s now? Like, come on.
Oh my God, just say it. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
Also, Geeta got a lovely moment in this, didn't she? Where she's comforting Rani. And she's like, "Oh,
Yes.
I see you and Sarah Jane. You have your little secret. Don't think I haven't noticed." And I get a bit jealous sometimes, but you've got a great connection there, and that was a lovely moment for her. Normally, she's just there for comic relief.
It really was. And it reminded me a little bit of how Maria was with Chrissy,
Mm,
but in like an opposite way. Because obviously Chrissy was quite, I mean, she was funny, but she was quite dismissive towards Maria in a lot of
yeah.
ways. And she didn't like Sarah Jane at all, or Bobby
Mm.
Sue, as she liked to call her. Whereas Geeta's more, she really likes the fact that Rani has this close relationship with Sarah Jane and encourages it, and friendships with Luke and Clyde. So yeah, this scene, it's a really nice moment.
It is. And throughout the series, when we've seen Luke on his video calls, and there's sort of frequent mentions of Sanjay, who it then turns out that they become partners later on,
Yes,
which is nice.
it is. It's really nice. Married couple now.
Oh yes, of course they do get married, don't they?
Yeah.
Did Russell have that intention at this point? Probably yes, but it was probably sort of dripping, feeding
Yes.
it in slowly.
Yes. So what I remember from reading, I don't think this was in the magazine actually, but I'm sure, I don't know if it was Joseph Lister who was in a podcast once, and he's one of the writers. And I think he mentioned in a podcast that CBBC wanted to have a gay character. And I think they pitched the idea to Russell, who was obviously happy to take it on board. And,
Hmm.
it was going to be Luke. But I think they didn't delve fully into it because they didn't really want a negative connotation of him leaving at the end of The Nightmare Man. Like, basically, him coming out in that episode, that was what the intention was
Oh, I
at the
see.
end,
Yeah.
which was, it was a positive thing. It was going to be received well by Sarah Jane and his friends, obviously. But they didn't kind of like the idea of his character saying that and then just leaving.
Yeah, that
They
makes
thought it
sense.
could have
Yeah.
like a bad sort of come across, not, in a purposeful way, but it could come across
Yeah.
maybe
No, it would have been
not in the
very
right way.
isn't there's this trope of bury your gays, which is like where gay characters just
Yeah.
get killed straight away, and it's like a bit like that, isn't it? It's like, oh, we've got a gay character, that's great, but now we're just going to tidy them out of the way so you don't have to think about
Yeah.
them.
Now he's no
Yeah.
longer in the show effectively. So, it was always the intention for Luke to be gay. And obviously it has been, he's married now to Sanjay, a character that
Yeah.
we've still never seen, hopefully at some point in some form, maybe Big Finish.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But yeah, that was that, I believe.
Right at the end of this episode, there was another moment that I found really touching, again, knowing that there's only like 3 stories left and they had to cut it short, where Sarah Jane says to them, with a team like this, I think I could go on forever. And watching it was
It's
just
a
like,
very
oh,
heart-wrenching.
that was very heart-wrenching, yeah. Very sad. But lovely as well.
Yeah, that's true.
But, not to be too, like, cringy, but, like, in a way, like, they are going on forever. Like, that we're still, 15 years later, we're still talking about it now and watching it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
obviously we got Goodbye Sarah Jane, which Russell put out in 2020.
Yeah.
So that's like a nice little webisode.
Yeah.
We've got Rani Takes on the World, which is the Big Finish box sets that explores her as a journalist.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you've listened to that, yeah?
Yeah, they are really good. They're really enjoyable.
You like it? Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I was about 12, I think, when Series 5 came out. No, I was 11, sorry. I was 11 when Elizabeth Sladen passed. So obviously at the time I was quite upset about it. And, Russell is he was on record saying like he didn't want to continue it in any way because obviously he wanted to respect her legacy, which
absolutely, yeah.
Which makes sense, obviously. It's an important thing to respect her and everything like that. So in my mind, like these characters were kind of just, we wouldn't necessarily know what happened to them. We'd just know that they were kind of going on and having more adventures. So when that set was eventually announced by Big Finish, and Joseph Lidster actually wrote the first episode. It was just a really nice surprise because I was like, oh, we're going to see where these characters have ended up and what's going on in their lives now, and see how it sort of connects to the Sarah Jane Adventures, but it's a little bit different because it's effectively a spin-off of a spin-off at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised with them.
Yeah, I might have to check them out. I don't tend to get on very well with Big Finish, but yeah, it does sound interesting.
Yeah, I've heard you. It depends really, doesn't it, on what you're listening to and how you kind of process media, and because audios are very like, I feel like you've really got to engage with it to kind of take in the story.
Yeah.
So that took me a while to get used to. I think I'd sort of practiced with Rose Tyler, the Dimension canon, and I really enjoyed that. So when it came to Rani Takes on the World, I was sort of used to it more. And yeah, they're really good to re-listen to as well. You pick up on like new things as well.
Cool. Well, this has been great. As I said, I really enjoyed watching this series. Definitely my favourite, I would say. And it's been lovely to talk through it with you. Thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me. And I've never done this sort of thing before, really. So if I say like too many times, it's a bad habit.
Don't worry about that. You've just witnessed how I speak before you get the edited version that comes out on the podcast. Like, it's painful. If I didn't edit it, no one would be able to listen. So, so yeah, I do a heavy edit job. And yeah, but no, it's been a pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I have. I've had a really nice conversation with you.
Listeners, thank you for listening. I will leave you with our usual sign-off. Stay cool, stay safe.
Stay fantastic.
Perfect.